she wasn't alive. I am not confused. I saw her. I saw her, and you saw her. I'm sure I saw her.
Do you want to come with us?
This rock, once you touch it, it's like a whoosh. It's it. You think this is just chance? We're all here because we've got stuff to work out. And you will be redeemed. Oh, it's a beautiful thing. You gotta trust me on this.
Or what? Is that a threat?
The story started with two siblings, Cal DeMuth and Becky DeMuth, who were traveling toward San Diego. Their journey seemed quite normal at first, as the long road stretched out in front of them. The atmosphere was peaceful and looked like nothing would disturb their trip. However, they suddenly decided to stop for a moment in front of an old church that stood alone by the side of the road because Becky felt nauseous, probably because she was pregnant, and so she vomited right by the car door. After a few moments, her condition improved, and her breathing became stable again, so they prepared to continue their drive. However, at that moment, Becky suddenly heard a voice of a boy who sounded like he needed help, and it came from a field of tall grass that stretched in front of them. The grass was very thick and high, which made it almost impossible to see anything inside. Cal and Becky looked at each other for a second and immediately felt worried. They felt that they could not ignore the boy who seemed to be in danger, and even though they were worried about the situation, they eventually decided to enter the field. But before going deeper into the tall grass, Becky took out her phone and tried to call the police, as she wanted to be careful just in case something bad actually happened inside. Unfortunately, the call did not go as she hoped because the connection was suddenly cut off. Not only that, but the phone signal also disappeared when she entered the tall grass. Shortly after, as they got further inside the field, the high grass started to block their view, and the road that was once clearly visible slowly vanished and was replaced by narrow paths that looked the same in every direction. Inside the field, Cal tried to follow the direction of the child's voice. However, something felt very strange because the closer he got to the sound, the further away it seemed to become, as if the voice was moving. Eventually, because the situation started to feel odd, Cal decided to go back to find his sister, as he did not want to lose her in a place like this. While shouting so Becky could hear him, he asked her to keep talking so he could find her position. But then, the opposite happened because the more they spoke, the further away their voices sounded. However, this was very confusing because they were both standing completely still and not moving at all. At first, Becky thought her brother was just playing a joke on her. Then, to find each other, they decided to jump up at the same time. On the first jump, they could still see each other clearly because the distance was only a few meters. But when they tried to jump for the second time, the gap between them suddenly became much wider for some reason, although they were not moving at all. At that moment, panic began to fill their minds. Cal started to run as fast as he could to get to Becky, hoping that he could find her quickly in the middle of the confusing field. But then, while he was running, he tripped and fell onto the wet ground, and when he tried to get up, he looked to his side. At that moment, his expression changed instantly as he saw the dead body of a dog, and it still had a collar around its neck with the name Freddy written on it. This sight made him back away in pure terror. Upon hearing Cal's screams, Becky tried to calm him down from a distance by telling him to stay quiet so they could think clearly and find a way out together.
I just slipped. What about the kid?
This is about us now.
However, the situation was not that easy, especially because they didn't know the way out and were apart. As time passed, the sun began to set, and the sky turned dark while they were still trapped in the field. However, they could not find an exit, and even worse, they could not find each other. Then, because of her pregnancy, Becky's body became very weak as she grew tired. But then, suddenly, a man approached her. The mysterious man turned out to be a father named Ross Humboldt, who was looking for his child. With a very calm voice, he told Becky that he could help her get out of that place. At first, she felt afraid. But then, Ross explained that he was the father of Tobin, the little boy who had been calling for help. He also admitted that he was looking for his wife, who was also lost inside the field. After hearing his explanation, Becky felt a bit relieved and decided to trust him. She chose to follow him instead of spending the night alone in the scary field, hoping that they could find the others and Ross's wife, Natalie, so they could all leave together. Meanwhile, as it became dark, Cal finally met Tobin, the boy who had been asking for help earlier. However, the meeting felt very strange, as the boy did not look panicked or like a child who was lost. Instead, he looked too calm, and the things he said made the situation even more confusing, saying that they would never be able to leave the field. After hearing that, Cal immediately thought that the boy was intentionally trapping him and his sister in the field. However, the boy denied this by explaining that he and his parents had also heard the voice of someone asking for help before they entered, but when they tried to find the source of the sound, they became trapped in the field instead. He also mentioned that they could not even find each other while they were inside. After that, Tobin told Cal about something else. He said that there was a mysterious rock in the middle of the field, and according to him, the rock could show everything that happened inside the grass, as if the rock was the center of all the strange events. Most importantly, he warned that Becky was in danger. Because of this, Cal did not want to waste any more time and immediately asked Tobin to lead him to the rock's location.
Tobin, did you lure us in here?
No, we heard someone yelling. A man. He was calling for help. That's how we got in. Becky, she's gonna die soon.
How do you know she's my sister?
The tall grass knows everything.
You must know where she is.
I can show you.
They walked for a long time through the maze of grass that felt like it had no end, until they finally reached the spot where the rock stood. The rock itself looked very strange and did not seem like a normal stone at all. Then, just as Cal was about to touch it, he turned around because he heard his sister screaming in terror. Because of that, he ran toward the sound of her voice without thinking twice, leaving Tobin and the rock behind to find her. The next day, a young man named Travis also arrived at that location. However, he was not a stranger, as he was actually the boyfriend of Becky and the father of the baby she was carrying. Moreover, his arrival was because his girlfriend and her brother had been missing for several days without any news, as if they had simply vanished into thin air. At that moment, while he was driving past the old church by the side of the road, he suddenly slowed his car down, as there was something that caught his attention. There were several cars parked there, and one of them looked very familiar. After looking more closely, he realized the car belonged to Becky and Cal. At the moment, confusion began to fill his mind as he started to check the area around the church. Moreover, the atmosphere there felt strangely quiet, and it seemed like the place had been abandoned for a long time. He then went inside the church to check, but there was nobody there. It was empty and showed no signs of life. However, when he stepped back outside, he found something lying on the ground. It was a book, and when he picked it up, he recognized it immediately, because it turned out that it belonged to his girlfriend, Becky. Upon seeing that, he realized something was wrong, so he decided to enter the field of tall grass to find them, not knowing that he was repeating the same mistake that Becky, Cal, and Ross's family had made, and walking into the same fate.
Becky!
By the time it became dark, Travis was still inside the field, and because he couldn't find his girlfriend yet, he decided to rest there for a while, but he did not realize that someone was watching him. Then, suddenly, Tobin appeared and stood right in front of him, as if the boy had been waiting for him. With a calm voice, Tobin said that he knew where Becky was. So, without thinking twice, Travis followed him immediately.
Tell me! Where is she?
Are you sure you want to see her?
Of course!
But you gotta stay close.
They walked a long way through the grass paths until finally they arrived at a spot where he found Becky. However, she was not in the condition he had hoped for. Her body lay on the ground, pale and motionless, and it was clear that she had passed away. With a shaking voice, he then tried to ask Tobin what had actually happened, but when he turned his head, Tobin was already gone and had vanished without a trace. The next day, Travis took a necklace from Becky's body and tried to find a way out of the field. He walked in every direction, but not a single path led him to an exit, and he could not find the church or the main road. Instead, there was only the tall grass that seemed to go on forever. He tried to shout to call for help, but no one replied, until finally, someone near the church heard him shouting from the field. But strangely, the person who heard him was the same boy he had met the night before, who was Tobin. However, this version of Tobin looked clean and neat, as if he had never entered the field at all. The truth was finally revealed that the events happening to them were part of a phenomenon called a time loop, a concept where time repeats itself at the same point, so a person or an event experiences the same day and the same situation over and over again. Just like what had happened before, Tobin and his parents, Ross and Natalie, entered the field because they heard the voice of a man asking for help, meaning everything went back to the beginning, and the whole story started again without any changes. Soon, night fell, and at that moment, Ross, who had been walking for a long time, finally found the rock in the middle of the field, and although it was like an ordinary rock, it felt like it possessed a great power. The next day, something much stranger happened as the time loop occurred once more. Becky and Cal appeared again, even though Travis had clearly seen her dead body earlier. Now, she was alive and walking as if nothing had ever happened. Just like before, the siblings entered the field because they heard Tobin's voice calling for help. When Travis tried to talk to them, he heard the voice of Tobin again. He realized that it was the same voice from the beginning, and it revealed that he had just lost his dog, Freddy, the same dead dog that Cal saw earlier. Without wasting any time, Travis told them to follow the sound of Tobin's voice. At that point, he began to realize something important. He realized that Tobin was not just a lost boy, but the key and the only connection that allowed them to find each other inside the grass. Eventually, everyone managed to gather in one place. While this moment should have been a relief, it actually created much more confusion. Cal immediately asked him how he had arrived there first, and with a serious face, Travis explained that he came because both Cal and Becky had been missing for more than 2 months. That number felt impossible to the siblings because they felt like everything had just started happening. Because of this, they began to understand that something wrong had happened. The field did not just mess with their sense of direction, but it also messed with time itself. There was nothing left for them to do except try to escape together while they were still able to find one another. Travis then carried Tobin on his back, hoping that by doing this, they could stay connected and not be separated again. They began to walk through the field that seemed to have no end. However, as hours passed as they moved forward, the result remained the same. There was no exit or sign that they were getting closer to the outside world. Instead, they only went further and deeper into the grass. Moreover, when they stopped to take a rest, something strange happened again. A phone rang in the middle of the field without a clear source, and when it was answered, the voice on the other end sounded very familiar. It was the voice of Becky, but it was not the version of her standing right in front of them. The voice on the phone warned them with a tone of panic and real fear. She warned that Cal must not hurt Travis, because if he did, they would all be trapped in that place forever. Upon hearing that, everyone stood in silence, because no one truly understood what it meant. However, one thing started to become clear. What they were experiencing had happened before, and someone was trying to change it. The atmosphere in the field slowly shifted. It was no longer just confusing, but it started to feel threatening. Meanwhile, the words from the phone kept repeating in Cal's mind. It was a warning that felt utterly strange, yet it was too specific to ignore. Because of that, suspicion began to grow between them. A few moments later, when Becky lost consciousness, Ross arrived and helped them wake her up. They then all started walking again to find a way out, but once more they failed to find anything. As the night fell, their journey finally stopped at a specific spot. It was the large, dark rock. No one dared to get closer, but Ross suddenly walked forward first. He moved slowly as if something was pulling him toward the object, but then Natalie suddenly showed up, and when she saw this, she became panicked. She quickly warned him not to touch the rock. She was clearly terrified, and it seemed like she already knew what would happen. Ross stopped for a moment and turned toward Natalie, but he did not move back. Instead, he asked her what she meant. Natalie then tried to explain that the stone was not normal, and that she had seen something through it that no one should ever see. However, her explanation only made him more interested. He then slowly stepped closer and ignored her warning, and as soon as he touched the rock, everything changed. He suddenly froze as he saw pieces of different events. He saw the repeating time loops and visions of the past, present, and future. A strange understanding finally came to him. When he finally pulled his hand away, he was a different person. His gaze was empty but filled with a weird confidence. Realizing that Ross was now a threat, Travis immediately rushed toward him to tackle him, but unfortunately, he was easily defeated by Ross. After that, without any warning, Ross moved with sudden speed and attacked his wife without any mercy or hesitation. He brutally crushed her head until blood poured out everywhere. Upon witnessing the horror, Cal, Becky, Tobin, and Travis ran away from the man to stay safe. They eventually reached an empty building in the middle of the field. The structure was old, and it felt like it did not belong there. However, they had no choice but to get inside to avoid Ross. Inside, Cal and Travis began to fight, and it was not just a normal argument. Cal could not accept the situation and blamed Travis for everything, believing that because Travis had made his sister pregnant, they had ended up lost in this terrible place, knowing that Travis was not a good man for his sister. On the other hand, Travis had actually changed and truly wanted to take responsibility for Becky and their baby. However, as they continued to argue, a loud sound suddenly hit the door. It turned out that Ross had found them. Without thinking, they all ran to the top floor to hide from him. While they were up there, they looked for a way to escape. They looked at the area around them and finally saw the church in the distance, where everything had started. However, something strange suddenly happened because Tobin's dog, Freddy, appeared out of nowhere. His appearance was not normal as he vanished and then showed up again on the road near the church. It seemed as if the dog was showing them the way out. Upon seeing that, they realized that they could escape if they followed the same path the dog was taking. A small hope appeared, but it was enough to make them move. However, when they were about to go down, Travis suddenly slipped. At that moment, Cal quickly grabbed him, but for some reason, he suddenly let him go instead of pulling him. Because of that, Travis finally fell from the top of the building. Not long after that, Ross finally found them on the roof, so they quickly escaped through a different path. Upon leaving the old house, Cal quickly forced Becky to follow a path into the field again, but in that moment, Becky finally realized the truth. She knew that her brother had deliberately hurt her boyfriend, and because of that, she made a big decision by telling her brother to go first because she wanted to wait for Travis instead. Upon hearing that, Cal could not accept this and forced her into the grass. However, that was where everything ended for him. Without him noticing, Ross suddenly appeared right behind him. Cal then tried to run, but there was nowhere to hide, and Ross caught him very easily. Just before he was killed, Cal looked at the area around him. He saw many of his own dead bodies scattered everywhere, and he realized that this hunt had been happening many times, proving that the time loop really happened. Meanwhile, Travis, who had fallen before, turned out to be alive, and with the little energy he had left, he got up and went back into the field to find Becky. During his search, Travis heard Becky's voice, and it was full of regret. She said that she was sorry for not being with him in the past, as he never became the man she hoped for. Travis heard her say that, and spoke honestly for the first time, promising that he would save her and that he would not let their baby be born in such a terrible place. However, Ross suddenly appeared and immediately attacked Becky. Fortunately, she found a pair of scissors and fought back, and with no hesitation, she managed to stab him and escape. Unfortunately, her run did not last long because something else appeared in front of her. Strange creatures emerged from the field whose bodies looked like humans, but their heads were covered in grass. They then grabbed her and carried her away to a different spot, and when she woke up, she was near the mysterious rock. In her panic, she then tried to call her brother, telling him not to hurt her boyfriend, or they would make the same mistake forever. At that moment, a terrifying truth was revealed, as it turned out that the voice they had heard on the phone earlier was actually her own voice from the present who was trying to warn them, but it was already too late. Suddenly, from beneath the rock, a dark and deep hole opened up that was filled with moving things. The creatures then tried to pull her inside, and she attempted to crawl away with what little energy she had left. Unfortunately, she was far too weak and eventually could not move anymore. Not long after that, Travis arrived and saw his girlfriend lying there completely helpless. Tobin also appeared with a look of fear on his face, telling Travis that his father, Ross, had already killed Cal and Becky's baby, and that this cycle would never end. Travis then tried to calm Tobin down, but the boy whispered that his father was watching them. Upon hearing that, instead of running or hiding, Travis finally chose to challenge Ross. Then, just as expected, Ross came out and attacked him until he fell unconscious. After he defeated Travis, Ross took Tobin toward the rock because he wanted his son to touch it, just like he had, to see the truth. But then, unexpectedly, Becky attacked him from behind and managed to injure both of his eyes. Seeing this chance, Travis, who had woken up from his fainting, got up and attacked Ross repeatedly until he died. At that moment, the odd silence returned, but everything was different now. Travis then looked at Becky and knew that she would not make it alive. So, with a heavy heart, he touched the rock and finally saw the truth of the field. After that, Travis quickly carried Tobin to a specific spot in the field, but his goal was not just to survive. He wanted Tobin to escape because it was the only way to stop the loop. Then, before they were separated, he gave Tobin the necklace that belonged to Becky as a sign and proof that the strange incident really happened, so he could stop Cal and Becky from entering the field in the future. He then lifted Tobin and threw him, and by some miracle, the boy was transported inside the old church. When Tobin stepped outside, Cal and Becky were still there and had not entered the field yet, so he approached them to warn them not to go inside by telling the truth about what was happening inside the field. Initially, they were confused and did not believe him, but when Becky saw her own necklace in his hand, she immediately understood that something was wrong. Because of that, they chose to leave and drive away. Meanwhile, Travis stayed inside the field to pay for his mistakes, sacrificing himself so the others could be free from the mystery of the tall grass.